The final moments of 21 years of marriage were disturbingly quiet, the only sound being the scratch of a pen across paper. Making it official, signing the death certificate for a promise of love and fidelity. Frank felt a stab of pain shoot through his chest as he set the pen down. These days he did not think twice about that pain. Early on in the divorce, he had gone to his doctor, who sent him out for all the tests. The results came back indicating he was healthy as a horse. The pain did not have a physical cause. It was all in his head, his doctor helpfully suggested. Neither his physician nor his cardiologist could explain where the pain originated. But Frank remembered when it began, to the second. He slid the document to his lawyer, as Frank's signature was the last one needed to make it final. Taking a deep cleansing breath, he looked up and across the table at the slim 39-year-old blonde woman sitting stiffly in her chair, arms crossed under the impressively large enhancements he had paid for. At her request, he had paid for a series of upgrades over the years, though each time he had tried to argue that he thought she was ravishingly beautiful as she was. She would not be swayed in her demands, so she got what she wanted. Slowly but surely, she became a different woman. Today, especially today, she bore no resemblance to the sweet, smiling 18-year-old he had fallen in love with and married. Cold radiated from her beautiful blue eyes as she looked back at him with contempt. Her overly plump lips turned down in a pouty frown. "It is over," Frank said quietly. Something flared in her eyes and she stood up quickly. He saw she was trembling. Was she frightened? The gob of spit struck his left cheek. Then she spun on her high heels and stormed out of the meeting room, her long white blonde hair bouncing perfectly over her shoulders. Her lawyer apologized quickly and rushed after his client. Frank's lawyer handed him a tissue which he used to clean his cheek. "George, do you think I could have a moment alone?" "Sure, Frank. I will be in my office down the hall when you are ready." "Thanks." His lawyer left the room, and Frank turned his chair to face out the window. The view of New York's skyline was pretty, but he had seen this view for over a year, as he had battled with his wife and her lawyer. He needed a change, a big one. Frank was retiring from his job and leaving the city. Hell, he was crossing the country to get away from everything that reminded him of her. He was going to find himself a nice little bungalow within walking distance of a beach, and he thought he'd make an attempt at writing that novel he felt floating around in the back of his mind. He looked back to the hallway where Stephanie had walked away as fast as her tight pencil skirt and 4-inch stiletto heels would allow. She had taken to dressing very young as she desperately fought back the years. She certainly had the body for the outfit, what with the nip and tuck and lipo, then the personal trainers. Another pang went through his chest. The amount of money Stephanie required for her pursuit of eternal youth was staggering. Her new sugar daddy was paying those bills now. He had have been willing to go to a marriage counselor, but she wanted the divorce. She had lined up a new husband, a rich one that looked the other way when she... Frank gave his head a shake. Stephanie was no longer his problem. He had to let it go. He had to get on with his life. Looking out over the glittering lights, he took stock of his current situation. He was a 40-year-old male in excellent health. Okay, maybe he was a little soft around the middle. For the last decade, his job had him trapped at his desk. His morning workouts and weekend cycling trips were not enough to completely combat the time he spent at his desk. His doctor had informed him he could stand to lose 15 pounds. Now he'd have time to dedicate to making his body hard and fit as it had once been. He was now a divorce. No kids. Not because he had not wanted them, but his wife had not been able to carry a child to full term. 3 miscarriages had been the limit he was able to endure, as each time he had almost lost her as well. He had planned on getting a vasectomy, but he discovered after the 3rd miscarriage they had removed her uterus to save her life. There had been no point in the vasectomy after that. He was 5'8" inches with broad shoulders, had a full head of black hair, silvering at his temples now courtesy of his ex, and he had all of his teeth. He had been told he had a nice smile, but he had not had a reason to show it for some time. With his square jaw and hawkish nose, he knew he was not pretty like the men Stephanie preferred to. No. Do not go there. He rubbed his chest and winced. He had been told by a few women in his office that he was a catch. One had even expressed an interest in being the one to catch him when his divorce was finalized. He had thanked them, but he was in no emotional state to be thinking about getting into another relationship anytime soon. Considering how destroyed he felt now, maybe ever. He no longer had any ties to the city. They had sold the Bed-Stuy townhouse and the cottage in AmITheA's vineyard. They had split the money on those. After months of hostile meetings and spiteful delays, it turned out that she did not want his money. She just wanted him to hurt. Now she was gone. He stood up. It was time to move forward. His partners were eager to buy him out at the company. George had the papers for him to sign in his office once the divorce was done, so he'd have more than enough savings to retire and live very comfortably and then some. So that was what he was going to do. Frank looked at the ring he was unconsciously rolling on his finger. It was just a simple gold band, signifying his undying love and fidelity to the woman who poisoned both. With a sigh, he pulled it off and dropped it in the trash on his way out. "You are a cold, heartless woman. You know that? A cold, heartless person." Elise quietly sat across the table from the screaming man. Her lawyer was telling him to lower his voice, and his lawyer was tugging him back into his chair. That was not an easy thing to do considering how big Michael was. The 28-year-old professional football player stood 6'2" and carried 230 lbs on his big frame. Enraged, he was a dangerous man. Elise's black eye was visible proof that she knew personally how dangerous he could be. It had been the second and final time he had raised his hand to her. 5 years of marriage, mostly happy, now flushed down the drain because of his substance abuse and subsequent physical abuse. She had tried to get him help for the first, but he was not interested. Told her to mind her own business, in fact. When he began to get physically violent, she knew she had to get out of their marriage. The police report on the second assault certainly helped expedite that. The big man finally sat and glared at the divorce papers. He was paying for the abuse, a lump sum. Elise had her own money and a good job, so she did not want the financial ties to him which alimony would bring. Her lawyer had convinced her to make the amount count, so she did. The lawyer was getting his piece of the pie, so he was the only one in the room with a smile on his face. The threat of her pressing assault charges and the prenup they had signed before they got married was making everything so much simpler. She saw Michael doing that thing with his eyes he always did before he began an attempt at bargaining. "Sign the papers. We are done," she ground out between her teeth. Michael's eyes snapped to hers, and she saw them go cold. He picked up the pen and signed. Then he stood and left. Her lawyer picked up the document and followed Michael's lawyer out of the room with a nod to her. Elise found herself sitting alone. She finally allowed herself to cry. She had been terrified of her husband, but she needed him to sign. Now she was free of him. When her tears stopped and her body finished shaking, she composed herself as best she could and looked out the window at the twinkling lights of Los Angeles at dusk. It was pretty, but she had come to hate the city. It was Michael's hometown and where his team was based. Everything about the city reminded her of him, so she was leaving. She had put her house up for sale and was expecting to get it sold before the weekend as offers were already coming in. She was looking at a little house in a pretty neighborhood in a small town further up the coast and would be putting an offer on it as soon as the money from the divorce came through. She had already worked out the logistics of working remotely from there. Her office was delighted to be able to keep her as she made them good money. Not everyone supported her decision to leave. The group of ladies she hung out with at work unanimously said she was nuts and she had be back within the year. Of course, they had also been keen for her to marry Michael. They said she was too young at 32 to move to a town noted for its suitability for retirees. They did not understand she had had too many years of living as the wife of a sports celebrity. He was 4 years younger than her, and in their 5 years, his enthusiasm for clubbing, partying, sports banquets, and road trips never waned. She had joined him on a couple of those road trips and vowed never again. She was done with that. She stood and stretched, feeling every one of the bruises Michael left on her body. His last attack had been surprisingly violent. He had carelessly left his cell phone on his dresser, which rang as she passed by. She picked up the phone as the caller ID was displaying a photo he had obviously taken of the young redhead in a compromising position. The tattoo he wore on his clean-shaven groin, just above his junk, was unmistakable. She had carried the cell to him in their living room and confronted him with the evidence of his fling. She had told him she had had enough and wanted a divorce. She barely saw the first punch coming for her eye, and the others came after she was down. She was lucky to survive. She called the police when she woke alone on the floor. They brought the ambulance. She had not been alone with Michael from that day on. She left the meeting room and ducked into the ladies' room to see how much of a disaster she had made of her makeup. She stood before the mirror and sighed, taking in her straight white blonde hair hanging to her shoulders. She wondered if she should get it cut. Michael liked it this length. She frowned. She also liked it this length, so it was staying. She looked at her pale green eyes and saw the swelling was noticeably reduced on her black eye. She had, what did her friends call them when they teased her? Oh yes, bedroom eyes. It was not intentional on her part. Her heavy-lidded eyes combined with the natural upturn on her full, wide, sensual lips had gotten her into more uncomfortable situations than she cared to admit. She had taken to wearing a pair of glasses with non-prescription lenses for meetings with clients. This did a good job of preventing these unintended miscommunications. She was diligent about going to the gym so her 5'10" inches body was reasonably fit. As Michael was a gym rat and had equipment at home, she had made good use of it. Her genes ensured she kept some of her curviness, and unlike the enhancements that redhead on Michael's phone had been showing off, her large breasts were natural. Enough. He was the past. He could have all the girlfriends he wanted now. She had her own life to restart. Again. It was divorce number 2 for her. She fought off a resurgence of tears. She had such terrible taste in men. Always the jocks. Always the overconfident, charming alpha men. Maybe it was because of her height that she was drawn to big men. Derek Chance had been her first husband, her first mistake. Granted, she had been an innocent 18-year-old when she married him. She had been infatuated with the 6'5" inches professional basketball player. He was big, black, and tremendously talented on the court and between the sheets. Her parents were mortified that their daughter, pure as the Nebraska snow of home, had shared her bed with one of his kind. They had quickly disowned her, and she had not spoken with them since. They would have hated Michael as well, she supposed. She followed her new husband to Los Angeles as he had signed a multi-year contract to play professionally. She learned a lot about what she liked and did not during her 3 years with Derek. He had a voracious appetite for romance, and she discovered that she did too. However, the thing she liked least was Derek's tendency to stuff his charm into any and every receptive person when he was away from home. The availability of free companionship on the road was a temptation he made no effort to resist. She walked away from that marriage wiser in many ways, but terribly hurt by his cheating. Worse, he had been the one to ask for the divorce, as he said he did not love her anymore. Elise had stayed away from the dating scene for 3 years and only met Michael when her frustrated coworkers dragged her to a bar after work. There had been a party for a group of players from his football team there. He was immediately mesmerized by her looks and intrigued by her resistance. When so many women practically threw themselves at him, it was the woman who pulled away that drew his attention. He had wooed her successfully over the course of 2 months and discovered he had struck the jackpot the first night they had had a romantic night. She was uninhibited, energetic, and knew what she wanted. His career was taking off, and he wanted her along for the ride in more ways than one. As Elise stared at her sad reflection, she recalled how he had promised to be true to her. She had let him know how her first marriage had ended, and he had assured her that would not happen with him. She dropped her head forward and closed her eyes. She allowed herself one final tear, then she tugged her wedding band off. Leaving it on the counter, she made her way outside to begin again. 3 weeks after he had stepped out of his lawyer's office, Frank stood watching a delivery truck pull away from his new home in Carmel-by-the-Sea, California, a beautiful small community of artists and writers, and the occasional nosy neighbor. Walking down the sidewalk towards him came one such neighbor. She lived 2 doors up the street from his place. He had only been in his new home for about a week, but already he had had 3 visits from Beverly Stoddard. Her husband, Rick, had been driving them by on their way home the first time. She had made him stop, and she got out to say hello. Rick had simply waved at him from the car, drove into his driveway, and went inside. The antisocial Stoddard. Beverly made up for her husband by being overly social. "Good morning, Beverly," he said, smiling to the petite brunette. She had to be in her 50s, but she seemed to take care of herself. She could not have been more than 5'1" inch, and he had almost mistaken her for a child when he had first seen her due to her size. Her husband Rick looked his age, and then some. Earlier in the week, Frank had spotted him standing on his deck enjoying a cigar, and the foul stench had drifted downhill to Frank's deck, driving him inside. "It is a lovely morning indeed, Frank. What did you get?" she asked, peering at the large, plain cardboard boxes. Then she spotted the mattress in its plastic bag. "A new bed? Did not you bring any furniture with you?" "Yes, a new bed. I only brought my clothes and a few boxes of personal items. No furniture. That stuff sold with the house. Neither of us wanted any reminders," he said, unconsciously crossing his arms. Beverly had already drawn out of him that he was recently divorced, he was from New York City, and he was retired. He was doing his best to keep her curiosity at bay for anything juicier. "You poor dear," Beverly said as she patted his forearm. Then she left her hand resting on his arm. That was something else about Beverly. She was a toucher. It made him a little uncomfortable that she seemed to need to touch him when she talked with him. He did his best to ignore it. "I will get stuff as I need it. I would not mind living in a minimalist way for a while. It is actually refreshing without all the clutter. The bed, though, that I needed." "Do you need any help getting all this inside?" "Why did not the delivery people do it?" Beverly said, looking at the boxes and obviously itching to get inside his home. "No, that is all right. I asked them to leave it here. I want to do this myself, and I'd better get to it," he said, as he gently pulled away from her grip with a smile. She had a little frown on her face, but she quickly covered it up with a smile. A moving van turned onto their street and made its way up the hill. Beverly and Frank both paused to look as the truck came to a stop across the street from his place. "Oh, our other new neighbor is arriving. How exciting. Having two homes right across from each other, sold within days of each other. It is so nice to have new faces in the neighborhood," Beverly gushed. The truck shut off its engine, but no one got out as the owner had not arrived yet. Frank turned to the task of moving the bed parts inside. He had an assembly job to do. Beverly remained outside, saying she was keeping an eye on the boxes, but really she was just waiting to see the new neighbor. The day was warmer than usual, and Frank was getting overheated from lifting all the awkward boxes. It really was a two-person job. So he went to his bedroom and switched his shirt to a sleeveless tank top. He went back outside to get the mattress. Not surprisingly, Beverly was talking with the delivery men. Just then, a sporty little silver car pulled around the corner and came up the street to park in the driveway across from his. Curiosity got the better of him, so he stopped to see who his new neighbor was. The door opened, and long, slim legs unfolded themselves out onto the driveway. Next he saw the blonde hair, then she was standing next to the car looking back at him. For just a second, Frank swore it was Stephanie standing across the street scowling back at him. Shocked, it felt like a slap, and he staggered back a step. His ankle caught on the mattress he was holding up, and he lost his balance, falling backward. Luckily, he fell onto the mattress, which went down with a loud thump. Frank could hear the delivery men laughing, and his face burned with embarrassment. Lifting his head, he scowled at them, but that just made them laugh harder. He was still a little unnerved by the woman's resemblance to his ex, so he struggled to his feet and carried the mattress inside. He shut the door behind him. He had an assembly job to do. The drive to Carmel had been truly lovely, once she had escaped the hellish traffic of LA, that is. Elise managed to calm down once she had gotten to the relatively empty roads north of the sprawling city. She had actually made up most of the lost time during the long drive up the coast. And no tickets. She had just visited the realtor's office and had her keys. As she drove through the quaint neighborhoods towards her new home, she felt a thrill run through her body. She was home. Here was her new start. Her lawyer had been efficient. The divorce was done, and she had walked away with enough to start over comfortably. The house in LA had sold quickly, just as expected, and now she had the funds to make her little house in Carmel exactly what she wanted. She had already done most of her shopping online and was looking forward to putting her own touch on the new place. She pulled into her driveway and got out, looking around. The neighborhood was lovely, full of charming houses with well-tended gardens. As she glanced across the street, she noticed a man struggling with a mattress. He looked up at her, and for a moment, she thought he was going to say something, but then he stumbled and fell. Elise could not help but smile at the sight. "Are you all right?" she called out, stepping towards him. He scrambled to his feet, his face red with embarrassment. "Yeah, I am fine. Just lost my balance, thanks." She nodded and gave him a friendly wave before turning back to her car. She had a lot of work to do to get settled in. Over the next few days, Elise focused on getting her new home in order. She unpacked boxes, arranged furniture, and hung up pictures. It was a lot of work, but it felt good to be busy. It kept her mind off the past and focused on the future. One afternoon, as she was working in her front yard, she saw the man from across the street again. He was carrying a large box towards his house, struggling a bit with the weight. Without thinking, she walked over to offer her help. "Need a hand with that?" she asked. He looked up, surprised. "Oh, hi. That would be great, thanks." Together, they managed to get the box inside his house. It was filled with books, and Elise could not help but notice the impressive collection lining his shelves. "Wow, you have got quite a library," she commented. He smiled a little shyly. "Yeah, I have always loved reading. I am Frank, by the way." "Elise," she replied, shaking his hand. "Nice to meet you, Frank." They chatted for a bit, and Elise found herself feeling more at ease with him. He seemed like a genuinely nice guy, and it was good to have a friendly face in the neighborhood. As the days turned into weeks, Elise and Frank began to see more of each other. They had bumped into each other while running errands or working in their yards, and their casual chats gradually turned into longer conversations. They discovered they had a lot in common. Both were starting over after difficult divorces, both enjoyed reading, and both appreciated the peaceful beauty of Carmel. One evening, Frank invited Elise over for dinner. He had recently finished setting up his kitchen and wanted to try out a new recipe. Elise was happy to accept. She had not had a home-cooked meal in a while, and she was curious to see what kind of cook Frank was. She arrived at his house with a bottle of wine, which Frank gratefully accepted. The meal was delicious, and they spent the evening talking and laughing, enjoying each other as company. "This is really good, Frank," Elise said, taking another bite of the chicken. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" Frank smiled, a little embarrassed. "I picked up a few things over the years. My ex-wife was not much of a cook, so I had to fend for myself a lot." Elise nodded, understanding. "Yeah, I know how that goes. My ex-husband was more interested in takeout than anything I made." They shared a rueful laugh, both recognizing the common thread in their stories. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, and by the end of the evening, Elise felt a warmth in her chest that she had not felt in a long time. As she walked back to her house, she could not help but think about how much her life had changed in such a short time. She had left behind a life of chaos and uncertainty, and now she was building something new, something better. And having Frank as a friend made it even better. Over the next few months, Frank and Elise's friendship continued to grow. They spent more time together, exploring the town, going for walks on the beach, and sharing meals. It was a slow, steady process of getting to know each other, and both of them found comfort in the companionship. One evening, as they sat on Frank's porch, watching the sunset, Elise felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She turned to Frank, smiling. "Thank you," she said softly. Frank looked at her, puzzled. "For what?" "For being here, for being my friend, for making this place feel like home," she replied. Frank's expression softened, and he reached over to take her hand. "I am glad you are here too, Elise. You have made my life a lot brighter." They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands and watching the sun dip below the horizon. In that moment, both of them felt a sense of peace and contentment that had been missing for far too long. As the days went by, their bond grew stronger. They found themselves leaning on each other more and more, sharing their hopes and fears, their dreams and disappointments. It was a new beginning for both of them, a chance to build something real and lasting. One sunny afternoon, as they strolled along the beach, Elise turned to Frank with a thoughtful expression. "Have you ever thought about writing that novel you mentioned?" she asked. Frank looked surprised. "I have, actually. It has been on my mind a lot lately." "Well, why not start now? You have got the time, and it sounds like you have a story to tell," Elise encouraged. Frank considered her words, a spark of excitement in his eyes. "You know what? You are right. I think I will." With Elise's encouragement, Frank began to write. He found joy in the process, pouring his thoughts and experiences onto the page. Elise was his biggest supporter, always there to cheer him on and offer feedback. As Frank's novel took shape, so did their relationship. What started as a friendship slowly blossomed into something more. They were both cautious, wary of repeating past mistakes, but they could not deny the connection between them. One evening, as they sat together on Elise's porch, Frank took a deep breath and turned to her. "Elise, I know we have both been through a lot, and I do not want to rush things, but I cannot deny how I feel about you. I care about you a lot, and I think there is something really special between us." Elise's heart skipped a beat, and she felt a warmth spread through her chest. She reached out and took Frank's hand, looking into his eyes. "I feel the same way, Frank. I do not want to rush things either, but I think we should see where this goes." With that, they shared their first kiss, a sweet and tender moment that marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. As the months went by, Frank and Elise grew closer. They supported each other through the ups and downs, finding strength in their partnership. Frank's novel continued to progress, and Elise's work was flourishing. They made a great team, balancing each other out and bringing out the best in each other. One weekend, they decided to take a trip to San Francisco. It was a chance to get away and spend some quality time together. They explored the city's sights, enjoyed delicious meals, and created beautiful memories. On the last day of their trip, as they stood on a hill overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge, Frank turned to Elise with a serious expression. "Elise, this has been an amazing journey so far, and I cannot imagine my life without you. I know it is still early, but I want you to know that I am committed to building a future with you." Elise felt tears well up in her eyes as she smiled at Frank. "I feel the same way, Frank. You have brought so much happiness into my life, and I want to see where this journey takes us." They embraced, feeling the weight of their past lift as they looked forward to a future filled with love and possibility. Back in Carmel, life continued to unfold in beautiful ways. Frank finished his novel, and with Elise's help, he found a publisher. The book was well received, and Frank felt a sense of accomplishment that he had never experienced before. Elise's career was thriving as well, and she found joy in her work and in her relationship with Frank. They had built a life together, one filled with love, laughter, and mutual respect. One evening, as they sat on the beach watching the sunset, Frank took Elise's hand and looked into her eyes. "Elise, I know we have both been through a lot to get here, but I cannot imagine my life without you. Will you marry me?" Elise felt her heart soar as she looked at the man she had come to love deeply. "Yes, Frank, I would be honored to marry you." With tears of joy in their eyes, they embraced, knowing that they had found something truly special. Their journey had been filled with challenges, but it had also brought them to a place of love and happiness. As they planned their future together, they knew that they could face anything as long as they had each other. They had both found a second chance at love, and they were ready to embrace it fully. Frank and Elise's wedding was a beautiful, intimate ceremony on the beach, surrounded by their closest friends and family. It was a day filled with love, laughter, and promises of a bright future together. As they exchanged vows, they both felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought them to this moment. They had both endured pain and heartache, but it had led them to each other, and for that, they were eternally thankful. Their life together was filled with joy and adventure. They continued to support each other in their careers and personal pursuits, always finding time to nurture their relationship. They traveled, explored new hobbies, and built a home filled with love and warmth. Years went by, and their love only grew stronger. They faced challenges together, always emerging stronger and more united. They celebrated each other as successes and comforted each other in times of difficulty. Frank's novels continued to be successful, and Elise's career flourished. They were each other's biggest fans, always encouraging and uplifting each other. As they sat together on their porch, watching yet another beautiful sunset, Frank took Elise's hand and smiled. "Thank you for taking a chance on me, Elise. You have made my life complete." Elise squeezed his hand, her heart full of love. "Thank you for being my rock, Frank. I cannot imagine a life without you." With that, they leaned in and shared a tender kiss, knowing that they had found their happily ever after. Their journey had been filled with twists and turns, but it had led them to each other, and that was the greatest gift of all. As they watched the sun dip below the horizon, they knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together, hand in hand, with love and gratitude in their hearts. Epilogue. Reflections. Years later, as Frank and Elise looked back on their journey, they felt a deep sense of fulfillment and contentment. They had built a life filled with love, laughter, and shared dreams. Franca's novels had touched many lives, and Elise's work had made a meaningful impact. They had traveled the world, experienced new cultures, and created countless beautiful memories. But more than anything, they cherished the simple moments, quiet evenings on the porch, walks on the beach, and the joy of being together. Their love had withstood the test of time, growing stronger with each passing year. They had found in each other a partner, a confidant, and a best friend. As they sat together, reflecting on their journey, they knew that they had been blessed. They had both found a second chance at love, and they had embraced it fully. Their story was a testament to the power of resilience, the beauty of second chances, and the enduring strength of love. And as they continued to write the next chapters of their life together, they did so with hearts full of gratitude, knowing that they had found their forever in each other.